your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What we're going to do now is essentially a live version, a live taping of our recap show that we usually do at the end of these games. So let's just get right into it, David, because the game is over. The Heat have the win. This is technically a Tuesday night edition of Locked On Heat. This will go up on Wednesday for everybody who isn't fortunate enough to be listening live right now. But if you haven't been following us over here on Locked On Heat, this is your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. I am Wes Goldberg. I'm here with David Ramil. Thank you so much for tuning in on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app and making Locked On Heat your first listen every single day. Remember that this episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends over at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. And David, the story of the game has got to be Tyler Herro, 25 points off the bench in 35 minutes, goes 11 for 20 overall from the field, 3 for 6 from three-point range, has 4 assists, 3 rebounds, and most importantly, plays Luka Doncic, goes head-to-head with him for a large swaths of this game. Luka, 33 points on 10 for 24 shooting, 5 assists, 3 rebounds. So yes, he had more points, but the more important stat here is that Tyler Herro was plus 21. Luka was minus 13. And the more important stat here is that Tyler Herro's got the W and Luka's leaving here with an L. Your thoughts on Tyler Herro versus Luka Doncic?
Well, I mean, Luka, phenomenal, a hell of a fine player, obviously MVP level candidate, but still relying a lot on free throw calls that I don't know any player who gets as many calls as he does at this point in time. If you're going to be taking away foul calls against James Harden because of the way he draws contact, Luka sure as hell gets a lot of calls in his favors. 12 free throw attempts for him as opposed to just, I don't even know, a handful for Tyler. It doesn't matter. That was a difference. It doesn't matter at all. Luka is a star. He's expected to carry that team. Tyler plays his role much more efficiently. He goes in there, comes off the bench, scores the basket, is looking to get his points, and he does. He creates plays for himself. He creates plays for others, and he's not necessarily relying on free throw calls. He's just an incredible offensive player, approaching what could be his offensive peak, to be honest with you. We'd like that three-point shot to be a little bit more consistent. On Tuesday night, it was falling, but overall, a phenomenal game from Tyler Herro. I think he's certainly in the conversation. As great a player as Luka is, I think you can make a conversation that Tyler belongs in that same category as one of the young stars of this league because he's been phenomenal. Certainly the leading sixth man of the year candidate at this point in time, and a hell of a score.
Yeah, Tyler Herro's got his swagger back. I talked with his skills trainer, Drew Hanlon, over the offseason. And I asked Hanlon, what did you want to do with Tyler Herro's game? And he said he watched every single minute of Tyler Herro's Miami Heat career. And what he noticed in that Milwaukee series and towards the end of last season, which was a difficult season for the Heat and for Tyler Herro, is that he just had lost his swagger. Now, I'm not really sure what that means. That just screams sports cliche to me. But specifically, he was talking about improving his shiftiness, his handle, his playmaking, adding more shots and footwork stuff to his bag and all that stuff. And what we have seen so far this season is a new and improved Tyler Herro. I mean, he is less predictable as a scorer, far more efficient as a scorer. And you mentioned the fact that he's your leading sixth man of the year candidate. I mean, he absolutely is. And he's not like all-star level, but he's putting up all-star type of numbers, right? Like from a scoring perspective. Now, I don't know that he's going to finish the year averaging 20 or more than 20 points per game, but why not? I mean, he's playing starters minutes, David. He's incredibly efficient. We mentioned the counting stats there, but you just look at his efficiency. So much more efficient than Luka Doncic. He was 3 for 6 from 3-point range. Luka was 3 for 9 from 3-point range. It feels like Herro is just so in control of his game right now.
Yeah, no doubt. His handle's always been particularly tight. His ability to just kind of create whatever space he can get. I know he's still not in that elite category as far as being able to push off or create space for himself because of his physical limitations. Although I really do think the improved strength this offseason is helping in that. But, there was that one play where he was kind of staring down Luka Doncic, I think in the second quarter at one point when Miami was starting to pull away from the Mavericks, and he took that step back three right in Luka's grill. What? That's, I think, what Hanlon was talking about when he was referring to that swagger. Look, I don't know how much it actually left. I know there were unrealistic expectations and pressure that was being put on Tyler last season. I know he didn't have a full offseason of work because, well, he didn't have the time. He's also 20 years old. There were also incredible and unrealistic expectations for how much of an impact he would have for this team. So a lot of that was just a cauldron, a bubble of insecurity, not to use a pun there, but I just think it was blowing up for him and he wasn't quite ready to handle that adversity. What 20-year-old is. And so I think now with the stability of a full offseason, with the vindication that this franchise always believed in him, regardless of whatever rumors or reports came out this summer, I think they always believed in him and his work ethic and his ability to contribute. And we're seeing a reinvigorated version of Tyler Herro, reminiscent of what he was like when he was a rookie, free of any kind of pressure or expectation.
Josh Van Meter writes in the chat, could Tyler Herro be the best player to ever come off the bench for Miami? Still early, but he looks unreal so far. This stat dug up by Associated Press writer Tim Reynolds. This is Tyler Herro's 24th game of 20 or more points off the bench for the Heat, tying Goran Dragic for the franchise's all-time lead. Tyler Herro, by the way, in his third season, he's 21 years old, and he's already tying those kinds of records. So yeah, Josh, I think that Tyler Herro is well on his way to becoming the best player off the bench. I think if he keeps this going for the season, it'll be the best season ever by a player coming off the bench for the Heat. I think that surpasses Ray Allen that year. I think all of that just on balance. But also, if he keeps playing like this, I don't mean to look too far ahead into the future, David. But if he keeps playing like this, can you continue to bring him off the bench, or do you have to start him? I don't know. That feels like a future Heat problem, but it would be a good problem to have. But before we get too far in the weeds with Tyler Herro stuff and predicting like 3 years ahead, we should talk about Kyle Lowry, by the way. Since that game in Memphis on Saturday night and this game in Dallas, Kyle Lowry has absolutely broken open offensively. 22 points tonight on 7 for 10 shooting. So efficient. 6 for 9 from 3-point range. He has made, what is it? I think he was 4 for 8 4 for 5 against Memphis. And then 6 for 9 tonight. So you could do the math on percentages. That's really good. I'll tell you that. Also had 9 assists and 5 rebounds. So not just bringing the scoring, but going over his season average of 7 assists per game from an playmaking perspective. Kyle Lowry, all that talk about, hey, is this guy the same scorer as he was in the first week or so of the season? Yeah, he's just fine.
Yeah, I know there were concerns there, but look, we talked about this in a recent episode when we talked to Eric Spoelstra or Bam Adebayo post game after Friday's win over Charlotte. We asked him about the shot making and the lack of shooting from Duncan and others. No concerns there. Just so much faith there. Kind of reminiscent of what we were just talking about, Tyler. The fact that they were able to just show that, look, you get yours when you can. There's no pressure. We've got other ways of scoring at this point in time. And look, for a player like Lowry, it's not like he was really worried. I wish I could confirm this. I know that's kind of been the reputation that Lowry has and has had for some time in Toronto, where he could just have a breakout game and things of that sort. Raptors fans didn't care if he was going 2 of 10 or anything like that, knowing that there was always going to be a breakout game. It's not going to be something consistent. We'd love to be able to see this version of Lowry for the rest of the season. It seems unrealistic just because I don't know. I don't know exactly. He just seems like when the shot is falling, there's that little extra confidence there, even for a player of his caliber. But you know what? You're right. No need for concerns. Total effortless game from him when he's just in the zone like that. He was just putting up incredible shots fearlessly. This is the version of Larry that we had hoped that we'd get. Look, he was pushing the pace, doing everything else he can, making plays for others, but it's nice to get that little boost of offense from him behind the line as well.
Yeah, and I do want to give some credit to the Mavericks. I thought that they had a really good game plan against the Heat. The Heat just outplayed them and sort of broke that game plan with effort and with shooting. In that first quarter, Dallas outscored Miami 30-24 and had a pretty significant lead. They led by as many as 11 points.
Yeah.
11 points in that first half. And I think the Heat were shooting like 20 something percent after that first quarter. The Heat end up finishing 51.8% overall, shooting 52% from 3-point range. I mean, after that 11-point lead, they came back, wiped away that lead, and then blew the doors off of Dallas, and ended up getting a really comfortable win. Again, 125 to 110 there. It really didn't feel that close toward the end. But you mentioned Kyle Lowry's shooting. This was on a night where Duncan Robinson had just 6 points on 2 for 2 shooting from 3-point range. So the efficiency obviously was there, 100%.
Not a concern. Not a concern. Yeah.
I'm not concerned, but it does speak to Dallas's game plan, right? Where I thought early on they did a good job of keeping the Heat out of those transition opportunities, and eventually Miami's conditioning just took over, and they figured something out and they broke it open. But early on, that wasn't the case. I thought like the Mavericks kind of kept a lid on it for the first quarter, and then obviously that lid came off. But obviously, a part of their game plan was not allowing Duncan Robinson to catch fire from 3-point range. They didn't allow him to catch the ball. They made Miami's other shooters burn them from 3-point range. It just turns out those Miami's other shooters did. Lowry, 6 for 9. Tyler Herro, 3 for 6 from 3-point range. Markieff Morris went 1 for 2. PJ Tucker went 1 for 3. It was overall still a really good shooting night, despite not having Duncan Robinson doing his thing and not having Max Strus, because Strus, of course, is injured. So again, credit to Dallas, but that means to me, David, that this is just a really strong win for Miami, that even when they were well scouted and the other team came in with a good game plan, they just somehow still came away with this pretty comfortable win.
Well, Miami had to do the inverse. Like you saw it early on where Tim Hardaway starting to get those open looks. Other players, aside from Luka, were starting to put up those points early on. And then Miami just kind of leaned into it. Let's double on Luka. Let's make his life more difficult. That's why they forced his efficiency so low. And then they were able to I think Hardaway took like 19 shots or something like that. No, the 13 shots. Oh, yeah, 13 3-pointers. I mean, you live with Tim Hardaway Jr. shooting 4 of 13. That's the plan there. Let's make things difficult for Luka. Let's force other players to step up. Tim Hardaway couldn't do it. Jalen Brunson had his moments, but it was still too little too late. By that point, Miami had a comfortable lead, and it seems like they had a good pace of what to do, exactly how to put their foot on the gas, how to tighten things up a little bit, just to make things kind of secure for them. I love the fact that Miami was able to make those adjustments and understand how to turn it around, how to initiate and execute their game plan much more effectively than Dallas does. And look, you can eliminate one of the best shooters on the planet, and you're still that good on offense where you can still make things so much easier. I mean, where you can still put up as many points and shoot 50-something%.
Yeah.
This team is really damn good. It's hard not to get carried away with it, but they're great defensively. They're great offensively. I'll tell you, between you and me and everybody else listening, of course, I'm kind of pissed off that they're not shutting down people and keeping them to under 100 points. I wanted to see that streak going. I know they lost out on that opportunity.
Greedy, David.
Yeah, I
Getting
know.
greedy here.
99 points or less, baby. That's it.
Billy Kuhn writes in, best part of tonight, our best 4 all scored plus 22 tonight. I can't recall that happening on a Heat team, even during the Big 3 era. Was there ever a night where Chris Bosh, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Mario Chalmers all scored 22 points? I'm not sure. That's what we're going to talk about here in a minute. But first, this episode is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group knowing that they're going to have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to, stopping on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. David, you know this about me, man. McDonald's, I think, is my favorite restaurant, and I love that they're supporting this show. I recently took a 2-week road trip from San Francisco to Miami with my fiance, and we stopped at McDonald's twice. We had a lot of great meals on that road trip. We had steak in Tennessee. We had steak in Boise, potatoes in Idaho. Like, we had all that stuff. Cheese curds in Wisconsin. But McDonald's in the car, you can't beat that. It's just a one of a kind meal.
I miss it. I'll be 100% honest with you. I am, as anybody who's been listening to this podcast for as long as most of our listeners have, I don't eat meat anymore. And sometimes I am the worst vegetarian of all time. I know some people are like grossed out by the idea of, burgers and things of that sort. No way. I used to love that stuff. And you're right. McDonald's, fantastic food. Always great. It was good, simple food and a great place to hang out and so dependable. You knew you were going to get off at whatever exit along the turnpike or 95, and you'll always find a McDonald's there waiting for you. Oh
Yeah,
man, so good. And their breakfast, their lunch, all of their food is great.
legendary.
Yeah,
Dependable like Jimmy Butler, dependable like Tyler Herro has been. Head to your local McDonald's and refuel and reconnect. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
that's right.
How'd you like my little bing bong there? My little
Can we? We're gonna have to stop with Bing Bong, right? It's played out. I mean, look, shout out to what was it, the Orlando Magic? I think they were the first one to kind of mock the Knicks fans, and rightfully so. Where do the Knicks rank? We've been talking for years now. Where do the Knicks rank for you as far as most hated franchises? Because I know a lot of Heat fans don't like the Knicks, and I feel like that's just
Yeah,
like carry over from the '90s era. Like I don't.
it is.
I, I have no animosity towards them. Like that. I
I have
mean,
none.
Charles Oakley's getting kicked out of Madison Square Garden. Like,
That's
how
like
can you?
that's like a Dolphins fan like still being angry with the Bills. I mean, now I get it because the Bills have the Dolphins number like these last couple seasons, but like over, it's just the Knicks haven't been relevant for so long. Like if you're still holding on to something
Right.
against the Knicks, like it's like you are kind of living like 20 years ago, right? I can't get myself worked up for it. Boston outranks them on the Miami Heat hatred scale.
Good point.
Dallas does. Like the Heat have more of a rivalry with this team than they do with the Knicks. I do want to talk about another guy from the '90s, Reggie Miller, and
Oh,
he was first of all. Look, I love the Kyle Lowry, Kyle Chaos thing. I wrote about it over at the West Side. We've been talking about it here on Locked On Heat. The up tempo stuff. It is certainly a talking point. It is not the only talking point in a broadcast, though. Reggie Miller, like, there's other players for the Heat that impact the game. It was just there was a lot of things happening, and it felt like Reggie Miller. The only thing he can analyze was the fact that the Heat were playing up tempo with
well,
Kyle Lowry.
look, to one thing, I think Reggie has actually improved as a commentator. There were times there where he was just rambling incessantly. He's no Chris Webber in that regard, but he's not much better. He wasn't much better for a period of time. I think he was just kind of focusing on the fact that this team looks different. This is not a style of play that we're accustomed to seeing from these teams. Like even with Jimmy Butler on this roster, and certainly in the years before that, when they were a slow plotting half court offense that would bring the ball up, pitch it to Hassan Whiteside, have him sometimes pitch it back out and see what happens if Josh Richardson can create a shot or not. This is a much more different version. And I know their pace isn't, it's not exactly electric. It's somewhat a little improved over what it was last year. But the fact that they're initiating things, getting things going, the kick out, I think, is a huge part of Lowry's game. No duh. But it's also helped Miami get some really open looks. Like the synergy between Lowry and Bam, or Lowry and Butler in
Yeah.
particular. He seems like he's just leaking out as soon as he gets that opportunity. As soon as
Yes.
he sees a turnover even about to happen, the reflexes, the understanding and awareness. Look, we've been talking about this for a week now. The high IQ of this team, they seem like they're 5 steps ahead of every group they've played so far, with the exception of that one team. If anything, that's what Chaos is. It's just
Yeah.
a deeper understanding of these nuances that most teams just don't pick up on.
The point you made is a really good one. We're going to be joined here in a minute by enemy lines here, Nick Angstadt, the host of Locked On Mavericks, to get his loser perspective on all of this. But
Does anyone
um,
care?
the point you make about Kyle Lowry is a really good one. I think a lot of people wondered what it would look like with Lowry coming to his first team that he's played, first new team in a decade, and all that stuff. But his teammates have reacted to him appropriately. They know that once Lowry gets the ball, that they are supposed to sprint down the court. He is a quarterback. He is a scrambling quarterback. He is Patrick Mahomes with his eyes down the field, and everybody else, the other 4 players on the court with Lowry, are the receivers trying to get open. But with that, let's bring in our friend Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavericks, live from the only surviving American Airlines arena in the NBA now. Nick,
American
how
Airlines
is it over
Center.
there? Center.
Oh,
Maybe you can't hear us. All right. Well, just like the Mavericks didn't show up. All right. Uh, we'll try it again with Nick
that's all right.
here in a minute. All right. Let's try to bring him in again here. Nick, you got us here. Maybe, maybe not.
That's okay. You know what?
That's all right. He'll
They're
jump on.
figuring
We can
things
just
out.
watch him.
Yeah,
There we
they're
go. I think we
figuring
got him
things out
here.
just like, yeah. Hey, can you hear us, Nick?
Nope.
No.
All right.
Oh, it's okay.
That's all right.
Hey, he's happy. Reggie Bullock played more than 17 minutes, so it's okay.
That's
Yeah.
right. Um, So yeah, that was the point there. I think Karmic Bead 7193 here. When he's talking actual basketball, he's really good. I think he's talking about Reggie
About
Miller
Reggie.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Josh,
Um,
we
so
can't rag on our fellow Locked On network hosts here.
apparently Kyle Lowry said he wasn't happy giving up 110 points in his
You
post-game
see,
interview.
I'm on to something now. They want to be look. These guys are greedy. I love this about this team. Like they really, not only are they invested in everybody else's success, but they recognize these things. They're kind of toying around here. I don't even want to say it because the only thing that can jinx this team, we all know what it can be. I don't even want to mention it. At the same time, right now they're playing as well as can be expected. I really didn't think that they were going to be able to coalesce as quickly to form such a
Right.
strong unit right off the bat. And yet here they are from game one already picking up the pace, looking like they've played together for years. What a great group. What a well assembled roster that's so complementary of one another. And it's the perfect role for Tyler coming off the bench and being electric as a scorer.
I got news for you guys. The Miami Heat, as of 10:16 p.m. Eastern time, are number one in the Eastern Conference standings. They are 6-1 now, tied with the Chicago Bulls for the best record in the conference. Miami 4-1 in conference, 3-1 away, 3-0 at home, 2-0 in their division. Have a point differential of plus 16.7, which was better than their last point differential of like 15 something, which was still at that point best in the NBA. So Miami only keeps getting better. They are starting to get that shine as a legit contender. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what's next for the Heat here in the next segment. But first, let's talk about Built Bar. I love Thanksgiving, all of the good food and treats and plenty of them. But maybe you want a yummy dessert, but that isn't so full of calories and sugar. It's the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. Replace the coconut cream pie with coconut Built Bar, or go to a raspberry Built Bar instead of the raspberry pie. Lots of good flavors to replace any pie. Have you ever had raspberry pie? I never even heard of
Uh,
raspberry pie.
I've never heard of raspberry pie before. They should make a pecan pie flavored Built Bar.
Well,
That would be
they have an apple pie one, and apple pie to me is like if you're listing pies, it's kind of like the first one you think of. That seems like all right. They got to improve the copy here. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein, covered in 100% real chocolate. Built is a great option for when you're hungry. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, just go for a Built bar or two right now. Share some of your family gatherings. It will make things less awkward. Maybe Aunt Betty hasn't tried a Built bar yet. Yeah, that'll be not awkward. Just handing your aunt a random protein bar. New surprises all month. Limited time flavors arriving at built.com regularly. So check the site often. There's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday. Mark your calendar. Black Friday will be a huge event with all sorts of surprises. So here is the offer for you to keep in mind. Go to built.com. Use that promo code LOCK15. You're going to get 15% off on your order. Use that promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Let's also talk about our friends over at Bet Online, back and better than ever with a new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all of the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use that promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, World Series, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage on all of the amazing offers available for this season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, David. So we were just talking about what is next for this Miami Heat team. So let's just take a look at the schedule here. We know what's coming Thursday night, back at home against the Boston Celtics. This is a big game for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's against the Boston Celtics. And when we talk about teams that Heat fans hate more than Knicks right now, it's probably Boston. The other reason is because they're wearing the Miami mashup jerseys. We talked about that on an earlier episode this week. But how are you feeling about this team going into that matchup? It's the start of a 2-game little homestand before a long West Coast road trip. So a couple important games against Boston and Utah on Saturday.
still concerned because those are tough challenges, both of those. For one, because Boston, we saw what happened to them last night against the Chicago Bulls. They had a comfortable lead there. Jaylen Brown was going off, and then all of a sudden Well, they didn't. They let the Chicago Bulls kind of walk all over them from that point forward. And you heard some comments from Marcus Smart about how Brown and Jason Tatum don't share the ball, they'll pass him, and he can only do so much from standing in the corner. So this is a team that's going to have some strife, and it's felt like it's been the case for Boston for a number of years, whether it was Kyrie Irving or Kemba Walker or Gordon Hayward or anybody else in that roster. It seems like they've always got some issues. It's starting to seem much more apparent that maybe it's just Brown and Tatum that are problematic in dealing with his teammates, but you trust that they have enough talent to be able to figure it out quickly. On Wednesday night, they go up against the Orlando Magic. So they're on a back-to-back set where they travel from Orlando to Miami. Not a great distance, but still inconvenient. They're going to get into Miami late, not have any time for a shoot around or anything like that. Who knows? Maybe that'll kind of laser-like their focus a little bit. Maybe it'll throw them off balance. On the other side, however, Miami's now a team that I feel much more comfortable with understanding what's at stake here. They had a letdown early in the season with the Indiana game, but now that they're aware of what it takes, they can't take any opponent lightly. And I don't think they do. I think this is a team veteran, savvy, and again, high IQ enough to understand what's at stake here. They want to dominate. They want to be able to get continuously better throughout the season. They're not taking any opponent lightly. Look, they haven't faced a bad opponent all season, with the exception of maybe the Orlando Magic. That was still a pretty good group in terms of, having some young players that could catch fire at any point. Cole Anthony for one. And then
I think we got Nick here. Nick, can you hear us?
Gentlemen,
There we
what
go.
a game.
We got him back. How are the Miami Heat chants over at American Airlines tonight?
That was maybe, outside of like a Lakers game, the most opposing fans I've ever seen in the AAC, I think.
Really?
How?
There was a lot. There was a lot of Heat fans. And they were up. There was one guy in particular that caught my eye. He was in one of those like dual color gradient pink and blue Miami Heat jerseys. And I don't know if he sat down the entire game. He was so into it. He was trying to lead Let's Go Heat chants. They came out strong.
Gotta love it. So Nick, what was your impression? We talked about it from the Miami Heat's perspective. We thought that David and I agreed on this. Dallas really had a good game plan going into this game. They tried to put the lid on the Kyle Lowry up-tempo stuff. They got the ball out of Duncan Robinson's hand, so he couldn't catch fire from three. Just so happened that some other guys did catch fire from three. But what were your thoughts from the Mavericks? Why was it that they lost this game?
Yeah, I think they lost because their bigs were awful. The Mavericks have 6 centers on the roster, and they're all like barely any of them are starting caliber. That was a big reason why they lost. I did think the Mavericks actually had a decent game plan in this, and the fact that they used Jalen Brunson in the starting lineup. They had 2 ball handlers out there, so all the pressure that the Heat put on Luka, they were able to dish it off to Brunson. He'd be able to work on the opposite side. Or Jason Kidd, even after the game, said they would have Brunson take the ball up when Luka was getting doubled or Luka was getting pressured, and so that way he didn't have to exert too much energy and get tired and all that. So I did think it was pretty good, but I mean the 3-point shooting was just insane. Like, they tried to put the lid on the Kyle Lowry thing, but how many threes he hit tonight? It seemed like every time there were huge shots too.
Yeah, 6 of 9 from 3-point range for Lowry. I totally had forgotten I've totally forgotten that he was even on Dallas's radar, because it always felt in Miami's side of things that it seemed like he was much more likely to join the New Orleans Pelicans. But of course, the Mavericks were a team that was looking to add Lowry over the offseason too. Any particular pain there and watching Lowry go off from deep and realizing maybe he could have been doing that alongside Luka Doncic in that starting lineup?
Oh, so much. On Locked On Mavericks, we spent an inordinate amount of time trying to convince a section of the fan base that Kyle Lowry was a great idea for the Mavericks. Right. And now they're like, oh, the Mavericks need a secondary ball handler. I'm like, there was one that they were going after this whole time. We tried to convince you.
What about Goran Dragic?
And he would have. Hey, that's what we're settling for at this point. At this point, like I said on yesterday's show, Frank Ntilikina had like a drive pull-up jumper, and I was like, oh, creation off the dribble. And I was impressed. And I was like, oh, no. That's what it's come down to for the Mavs.
So, Nick, you host Locked On Mavericks. Obviously, you're also part of the Locked On NBA crew. Just really curious, are we just drinking Kool-Aid here in Miami, or should we start to think of should the Miami Heat really be considered like a legit finals type of contender?
No, this Heat team is real. I get a little nervous about the PJ Tucker, Marquise Morris, like they were playing one of the Martin twins. I don't even know which one it was, but I get nervous about that spot in the rotation. But other than that, I mean, you just have so many different ways, so many different looks you can make, so many different versatile defenders. I mean, Bam and Jimmy Butler and even Lowry himself. So that team is in there, well coached, obviously. That team is going places.
Last question for you, Nick, then we'll let you go. Were the 2006 finals rigged?
I'm standing outside of the American Airlines Center. I have to say yes. Of course. Donaghy admitted it. Donaghy came on many a podcast and radio show and said that he did. So, yeah.
It's a little bit of a stretch of his comments, but that's okay. Nick, enjoy the rest of your night, man. Thanks for coming on. Good stuff from Nick there. All good stuff. We got a question earlier. I'm trying to find it about John Wall. Got another question about Victor Oladipo. Does this success that the Heat have had start to change maybe the timeline for any of these kinds of moves? Because during before the season, Pat Riley said, hey, 20 game mark, that's when we'll start to evaluate some of these things. That's pretty typical across NBA front offices. But if they're playing like this, I know they've got a really tough road trip coming up here, David, but if they're playing like this, I don't think that the urgency is there. It's not to say that they wouldn't make a move. I think obviously if you're a contender, it maybe increases that willingness to want to make a move and dip into that luxury tax. But as far as trying to rush guys back or add to this group right away, I don't think that urgency is there. What do you think?
You know, I'm looking at it from the flip side of that, to be honest with you. I think when you're this good, you almost have to double down right away to ensure you stay this good. And I think that increases the urgency from the front office's view to say, you know what, we do see that this team is that good. And as such, we're going to spend a little bit more. Remember Riley's comments. He said pretty flatly, we don't want to force Mickey to spend all this money, even though it's basically pennies for a billionaire like him. And at the same time, they were unwilling to go into the tax. I understand that perspective. But now that we're seeing this team be as strong as they are, I think they're much more willing to make those kind of changes. However, to answer the questions that were posed of us, I don't think John Wall is an option. I don't think he's on Miami's radar. I don't think Pat Riley thinks of John Wall as a savior or even a player that could provide any kind of a boost for this roster. I think they're invested in seeing what Victor Oladipo could provide. I wonder if like I mentioned to you recently, I wonder if they kind of speed up his time frame to see how soon he can get back and what he provides before going out of their way then to add any other player. Now, we're also hearing some scuttle about the possibility of Goran Dragic being traded and potentially bought out by another team. And if that was the case, whether or not Miami would join him, if Miami would add him to the roster, I think they would. I think they absolutely would. Even though he's not a perfect fit, I think they would prefer to have a guy that's as proven, as understanding of what it takes to be a Miami Heat player, a guy who would fit in seamlessly in that roster. He's been a teammate of Kyle Lowry's. He's obviously had a strong friendship with Bam and Jimmy and everybody else in this roster. I think he's probably their top priority right below Victor Oladipo, and seeing what he can provide, they would rather wait and see whether or not they could add a guy like Goran back to the lineup.
Are they allowed to under the CBA rules? Like if he would have to be traded to a different that third team, and then if he's bought out,
right, that would make him an unrestricted free agent where he could sign anywhere.
How interesting. Well, I do think that there could be a need for some backup point guard stuff here. The Heat are undefeated with Kyle Lowry, have not won a game without Kyle Lowry. It was a one-game sample, but it does feel like there could still be a need there. And there's still some wiggle room on this roster, not just because they have an open 15th spot, but because there's some other guys in this group that you could afford to waive or trade into another team's cap space or open roster spot, whether that's a Gabe Vincent or a KZ Okpala or something like that. There are some other moves to be made, but I do agree with you, David. I think that going back to what Pat Riley was saying, if they're not a contender, if it doesn't feel like they're anywhere close to it, maybe there's less urgency to make a move because of all the luxury tax implications. But it's only worth adding a player on the buyout market or somewhere else and dipping into that tax, and then sort of opening the door to that repeater tax threat, right? That they'll certainly end up going into when all these other salaries that they have on the books start to increase over the next few years. It's only worth it if you can win a championship. But we have seen this team in the past make that sort of investment when they believe that they're ready to go.
Are you somehow asking questions of our podcast here? Because somebody just wrote in, just add Mario Chalmers. I mean, that would be ideal, right? That's the right question, right? He's the best fit, obviously.
Candy
I think.
Samples has found the way to my heart, man. Like this commenter here has figured out all the right buttons to push here.
Yeah.
If you mention Mario Chalmers, you will get on the show. It's in some way, shape, or form. It's a guarantee. Yeah, let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
bring in Chalmers, man.
Yeah.
I think
I
that
think
Achilles is ready to go. He looked good in the big three. I think he's all recovered now. All right, quickly, David, let's just another look ahead to the schedule. We talked about Boston. We talked about Utah. The Heat are 6-1 right now. I think Boston, Utah, we had a comment earlier. Boston is very hungry. I could see this being a really tough game for the Heat. Also, I don't know if this is actually a thing, but with the new court, the new uniforms, maybe it throws them off a little bit, like the shooter's eye and all that stuff. I don't know. I'm a little worried about that game if I'm being honest. Although the Heat do have the defenders to take out Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and it's not like they pass the ball ever. So maybe it's not as much of a problem. Then Utah at home. I don't care where you're playing Utah. That game, that's an NBA TV game. Is there a way to flex that into like ABC, ESPN, TNT? I guess it would have to be a Turner thing.
Yeah.
Those are the two best teams in the NBA right now. Like, and that's getting stuck on NBA TV. That's no good for the league.
Yeah.
But that's going to be an incredible game.
I know people are going to suggest that maybe I'm playing up to our boss at the network, David Locke, but the reality is I am a believer in what the Utah Jazz are doing.
I am
Something
too.
similar. Yeah. Something similar to them. What we saw from Milwaukee over the last couple of years, a team that's been questioned whether or not they can get out of the first round, that they have some obvious limitations there in Rudy Gobert, whether or not he gets played off the floor, a very good regular season team. But keeping that team intact, keeping the core of that group intact, and then adding in veterans like Rudy Gay and others, Eric Pascal, and other players that can fit a good role on that roster, just smacks of just teams kind of making changes around the edge. I wonder if, a big conversation from last year, especially one that we faced on Locked On NBA, was, these small market teams, whether or not they'd be able to add any of these players from the buyout market, whether or not you'd want to join a team like Utah as opposed to a team like Miami or Brooklyn or somebody else like that. That's going to be a really interesting question. I'm not sure how much space they have. I'm not sure how much of a need they actually have to add a buyout player, but I think the Jazz are a legitimate contender. I think they're better this year than they were last year, which is saying something because they were really, really good. And I think they're going to figure it out. So to me, this is the toughest test of the season. As much as Brooklyn was a tough test in Brooklyn, as much as there was energy and excitement about the Milwaukee matchup, this is a really tough one because Miami hosting Utah, those are some matchup nightmares for the Heat, and I'm curious to see how they keep up there. Mitchell in particular is going to have a pretty solid game, I think. I wonder who starts off guarding him. Would you put Lowry on him, or do you put Jimmy on him right away?
I think you probably I think you might start Lowry on him, but Spo has been really quick to pull that Jimmy Butler card when he wants to. So I could see them going with Butler. The key will be, to me, what Gobert does offensively, because he's been awesome offensively, and I think that could be his size, strength, his height. I think could be a problem even with Bam in the middle there. The Heat will switch everything. They will force Utah into switching as much as they can. It's going to be really interesting. But if Miami's going to win that game, not to get, again, too far ahead of ourselves here, but if Miami's going to win that game, it's going to have to be because that 3-point shooting is like it was tonight against Dallas, and be really, really good, and the game could come to that. By the way, Dwayne Wade will absolutely be in the building for that, right? I mean, I'm not reporting that. I just imagine that Dwayne Wade will show up for this one.
Especially if they have those jerseys. Already putting in a request for what is it, a size large shorts for him? That would be interesting. I mean, I guess he's a fan of the Miami mashup look, so that's good. And look, shout out to former Locked On Heat co-host Jack Alfonso with his silly pun about Charlie Parker of the Jazz for Bam Adebayo. That's a pretty funny one there.
What do we got here?
Jack also from Miami Heat beat to some extent, but I don't know how much he's affiliated with a group like that.
All righty. Well, we got old school Jazz references. That's a good way to end it. Get in more questions. We will answer them on our mailbag tomorrow. I think is that what we're doing? I don't know.
It is now. Sounds great.
I know. I'm making it up as I go. We don't have to do a mailbag. Only if we get the questions.
That's right. Yeah. Send in great questions because I think Look, this is an energized fan base. It's a great team. I think a lot of people are excited about their early season success. They're entering their toughest stretch, perhaps, of the season, not just the season so far, but perhaps the season in general. And so it's going to be a good test to see how they go on the road and face some really tough teams. Not only do they face the Jazz at home, but they're part of this 5-game road trip that they've got after this 2-game homestand, where they'll go to Los Angeles, they'll go up against is it Denver too? I mean, it's a tough stretch there for Miami. Obviously, those locations, Denver and Utah, you never want to go there on the road, but yeah, you have to a couple times a year, and it's going to be a really, really interesting test for Miami. But I'm a lot more confident about this than I've been in years past. Not big 3 levels of confidence just yet, but I like the way that this team understands those nuances within a game-to-game situation, how they adjust for things, and at the same time, how they just don't take any opponent lightly. Those are my takeaways from an opponent like tonight.
Getting these first 2, the only 2 Jazz games out of the way in about a week's time, right? You got them November
Next time
6th
they
at home,
meet,
and then on the road on
and they'll
November
meet in the
13th.
finals.
Then I was about to say that's a lot of months in between November 13th and June, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time. That'll do it for today's Locked On Heat. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Comment, leave a 5-star rating. Reach us on Twitter at Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 daily fantasy basketball show on the planet. It's free. It's available on all platforms. Thank you so much for tuning into this live edition of Locked On Heat. We will be doing this, I think, again, David. This was a lot of fun after some primetime games. I think we're looking already next week at that Lakers game. So be ready for that. Be ready for our mailbag tomorrow. We have a recap of that Boston game, but that's it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in.